Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some Tales from the Squad Car. Our first story today comes to us from Colonel O'Neill. I wasn't pulled over, my butt was stopped. Let's jump right in. Preface: I've luckily never been pulled over by a cop, aside from this, nor have I ever been on the wrong side of the law. I work with cops, I have friends who are cops, and I'm well aware of the dangers faced by Leos on traffic stops. I know it's preferable to wait for backup on some nightmare crap. With all that said, from a civilian's perspective, the following event kinda still cracks me up. A few years back, I worked mornings at a local TV station. That meant I was usually on my way to work around 3:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. One day, after having just left my house, I reached the end of the first street on my commute. There's a stop sign at the end, which I usually roll through, since it's barely even the butt crack of dawn and nobody's ever around. Well, today, there was someone around. As I pull up to the stop sign, something catches my eye. I notice there's an SUV parked at my 10 o'clock, at the end of a parallel street. The only light coming from that direction is the street light on the opposite side of the road, so the SUV is just a silhouette. Luckily, I'm pretty quick with spotting stuff, like the outline of the light bar on top of the SUV and the bull bar in front. I stomp on my brakes to make sure I don't blow through the stop sign like I usually would. No reaction. Phew. I turn right onto the next street, which leads to the main drag. That little crap comes to life and starts following me. F. No berries yet, just headlights. Stay cool. I turn left onto the main drag. Effer stays with me. Crap. So I start thinking that maybe he's just heading back to the PD since it's up ahead, down a street that will connect with the one we're on. We pass the turn that leads towards the PD. He's still behind me, just headlights creeping. Dang it. So at this point, we're just out for a romantic early morning cruise together, me on my merry way to work, and him playing Big Spoon behind me for well over a mile. Then I start to see flashing lights up ahead. They don't appear to be moving at first, so I start thinking that the guy behind me must be on his way up there, and I'm just in his way. Then the lights start coming towards me. Great. So now I'm thinking that these two cruisers are going to converge and blockade a house nearby or some crap like that, with me in the wrong place at the wrong time. Cruiser number 2, the one heading towards me, blue and whites on, comes roaring round the bend. Cruiser number 1, Kolchak, the friggin' Night Stalker behind me, is still just running with his headlights. Seeing cruiser number 2 approaching quickly with its lights on, I pull over to the side of the road, as is normal in the case of an approaching emergency vehicle, right? He turns his effing lights off and starts mellowing down the road towards me, like he's just going to pass me by. All the while, cruiser number 1 is just kinda hanging out in the road behind me. What the F? So cruiser number 2 no longer has his lights on, and cruiser number 1 never turned his on in the first place. Must not be for me, right? Legend has it, when the emergency lights turn off, you're free to go. Well, I started to pull back into the road and gave it a little gas. I'm not a big fan of whiplash, but it's kinda unavoidable when cruiser number 2 suddenly flips his lights back on, swerves across the road in front of you, stops dead, and prays to whoever made him that you stomp on your brakes to keep from crashing into him. Jesus Christ on a bike! So now I'm wedged in between two cruisers. Oh, cruiser number 1 finally decided to turn his lights on at this point. Crapping myself because I don't know what's going on. I'm starting to sweat because last night was midgets and ponies and I didn't delete my browser history. I'm also starting to curse the name of my friend, who's a patrolman in town, on the early morning shift no less, and wondering what I'd do to him if he came running out punk style after clowning me like this. Well, that didn't happen. 2 officers hop out of cruiser number 2. Later found out it was an FTO and FNG, figures, and a solo senior graybeard officer hops out of cruiser number 1. Graybeard comes to the window, says he needs to see my license and registration, and asks where they are. My white-knuckled hands haven't left the steering wheel this entire time. I tell him where my documents are, and he tells me to get them. Can I put my car in park? I ask, with my foot having been planted firmly on the brake this entire time. Yes. We're suddenly living in an adult film. I reach for the shifter in the center column. and you're reaching for the shifter and grab it and putting the car into park. I'd love to say that this had some thrilling ending, but alas, Graybeard merely told me that they were looking for a reportedly strange vehicle wandering around my neighborhood and thought I was their man. Having checked my driver's license, he must have seen my address and known I wasn't. Graybeard told me I could unclench my butt now, and I did so with a sigh of relief. The three of them gathered in the middle of the road to chit-chat. I asked them if they knew Officer so-and-so, my friend in the PD, which they did. I asked if he was on that night. They said no. I asked if he put them up to this, and they laughed. I departed, proceeded to work, and had to explain to my super why I wasn't as early as I usually was. I was met with significant ball breakage. I'm trying to understand why the car coming towards them had the lights on and then the lights off. Maybe they were on for a moment as a signal to the other police car, and then you have the other police car with the more seasoned officer in it. I don't understand why he didn't turn on his lights even once OP pulled over. I can understand OP trying to drive away. I mean, if there was a car behind me that didn't have its lights on, then I would think I was free to go too. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from Jolly Green Spartan. A welcome surprise. Let's jump right in. My FTO and I were dispatched to a welfare check. Caller requests investigation on her friend Gertrude, who lives at this address. No one has spoken to her since Sunday. It's Tuesday now. Caller states check well, missed her dialysis appointment this morning. Caller states Gertrude is 93 and lives alone. I really hope Gertrude turned on her AC before she died. I also hope she doesn't have pets, or that she fed them before kicking the bucket. We arrive with another officer and see our caller standing out front. The address is the middle unit in a row of one-story condos or townhomes. I look in the garage and see a car parked inside. There's no obvious signs of forced entry at the front of the unit. I go back around and check for another door, nada. As I attempt to pry open the storm door with my pocket knife, my FTO calls our sergeant and explains the circumstances. We get permission to force entry. The storm door opens outwards, which means we can't just kick it, so I pull out my flashlight and smash the glass. I reach in, unlock the storm door, and find that the main door is unlocked. We draw our pew-pews and enter the house to clear it. The third officer and I head down the main hallway to a T intersection. He goes left and I go right. There's one room at the end of my hallway, the master bedroom. I can see a body lying on the bed from the doorway. Well, I found Gertrude. She's dead for sure. All of a sudden, the dead body on the bed snores. F. Dead people don't snore. I holster my pistol and move to the bedside. Gertrude, police, can you hear me? Her eyes open and her arms extend slowly into the air. Gertrude opens her mouth and closes it like a fish out of water. I check her pulse and find it to be weak and irregular. She seems to be unable to talk. Well, she might be dead soon. Squad number X, start EMS code 3. I'm an EMT in addition to being a police officer, but I only carry trauma gear and Narcan on duty. For opiate overdoses, pew-pew wounds, and traumatic amputations, I'm your guy. There's nothing I can do for Gertrude except keep her on her side to protect her airway and be Johnny on the spot with chest compressions if she goes into cardiac arrest. I start searching the room for an ID for our report as well as EMS's run. EMS arrives and does their thing. Gertrude is diabetic in addition to needing dialysis, and her current blood glucose is 58. That's not crazy low for the average person, but Gertrude is 93 and has other problems. They load her up and transport her to the hospital. There's no such thing as a routine call. Every time I think I know what's going to happen, my expectations get subverted. Oh, Officer OP, you know if Grandma Gertrude ever sees you again, she's gonna tear you a new one for breaking her storm door. And let's be honest here, even if Gertrude was on her way out, she was gonna die at home alone. Now, she at least has a chance to be around family and friends. Our next story today comes to us from LSCRX. Park police accused me of racing and showed up to the court date. Let's jump right in. This happened more than 20 years ago when I was a teenager and living in the DC suburbs. I was driving a sporty two-door coupe with a manual transmission, and my friend was driving his mom's automatic sports sedan. We were meeting up at a gas station and both had a passenger. Earlier that day, I fell while rock climbing at an indoor gym and hurt my left leg, which was making it painful to drive my car with a clutch. My friend volunteered to swap cars after we met up so that I could drive the automatic, and my only concern was that my friend had a tendency to drive like an idiot. I specifically told him, after agreeing to swap cars, that he needed to not drive like an idiot. He proceeded to peel out of the gas station as I was getting into his car with my passenger. Shortly after I pulled out of the gas station, I was passing through a fresh yellow light when I noticed a parked police trying to turn right. There was a car ahead of him, and I dropped my speed to 35 miles per hour since I wasn't sure what the speed limit was. A few moments later, the parked police, with his lights on, blew past me and disappeared over the hill. Then I saw that the speed limit was actually 45, so I sped up some. After I came over the top of the hill, I saw the parked police pulled over in the left shoulder. There was a grassy median with my car in front of him. Crap. I was inexperienced in these types of things, but felt like pulling over to let the officer know it was my car and that my friend had permission to be driving it would be a good idea. It was not. I pulled up behind his cruiser and the officer yelled at me, understandably, wanting to know what the hell I was doing. I explained out the window, and he said to go ahead and pull around him and park in front of my friend. I did that, and after a minute, he came to the window and wanted my license and the paperwork for my friend's car. I didn't see anything wrong with that because it seemed like he just wanted to verify that both of us were telling the truth. I was laughing about the situation with my passenger because I had done nothing wrong, and we both thought it was kind of funny that my friend would get pulled over seconds after agreeing to not drive like an idiot. By now, several cop cars have joined the parked police officer. I figured it was just a slow night, but still was unconcerned. The officer requested that my friend and I exit the cars and come to his car, and that he was going to give us a break. Us? I thought, what break would he be giving me? So we went to his car where he had some paperwork on the hood. The officer told us that he wasn't going to write us for engaging in a speed contest and that he was only going to write us for negligent driving. My pulse started to race. I had done nothing wrong. What the actual hell is he talking about? Now, I didn't know much, but I did know better than to try and argue this on the side of the road. So I took my ticket and left. I was incredibly annoyed and pissed off. And the court date was months away, of course, so I had a lot of time to stew over it and also to forget about the court date. So a few months later, I was thinking about my court date, which I was sure was coming up, and I dug the ticket out only to realize that the court date was this morning. It was afternoon. Crap. So I went to the courthouse, certain that they were going to arrest me or something, and they told me it was fine and that I could just pay the ticket. I explained that I would still like a court date and was told that if I paid the fine, I could still have a court date. So I did. The second court date was approaching months later, and I realized ahead of time this time that we'd be out of town for vacation that day. So I called the court and they gave me another court date. They didn't seem to care now that they had my money. That was my thinking at the time. I want to say that I delayed it again at least one more time before I actually stuck to a date and showed up. I was going into the military and didn't want this hanging over my head. I arrived early to court right before a holiday weekend, and I was nervous as heck. They started reading off people's names, and I was so relieved not to be first, except they failed to appear, all of them. They read off 24 names before they got to me, and all of them weren't there. F. So it was my turn. They called for the officer, and he was also there, of course. The judge heard from the officer first. I pulled over Mr. LSCRX on date at time for raising my hand because I'm an idiot high school student. The judge was annoyed. What, Mr. LSCRX? Your Honor, he didn't pull me over. What do you mean? Explains the entire story. So you had switched cars with your friend because you hurt your leg? Does your friend's car have a special brace for your leg? Respectfully, no, Your Honor. His car is an automatic. Judge realizes the logic. Oh, that makes sense actually. Judge to the officer, is that true? Your Honor, I would like to say that is a more accurate description of what happened. Yes, it was more accurate than your lie. The case was dismissed and I got a refund for the fine that I had prepaid. I don't know why the officer thought we were racing. We weren't even remotely close to each other when he saw my friend speed through the intersection. I'm a big Leo supporter. I was even a corrections officer for a short while after getting out of the military, but that guy was way off base. I'm actually pretty impressed in this case that the officer decided to not continue lying and told the truth that it was an accurate description of what happened. It could be a case of it was so far back and he didn't really remember what happened anyway and just wanted to be out of court for the day too. Our next story today comes to us from Thurin, in which I run a red light and my broken POS car saves me from a ticket. Let's jump right in. So this was many years ago when I was still a teenager working at McDonald's. I drove this terrible old Honda Accord at the time and had just finished a long shift at ye old McD's. Before I left, a coworker asked if I could come back at closing and give him a lift home. No problem, says I, and I went home for food. A couple hours later, I drive back up to the MacD and it's totally dark and no one is there. Huh? I go up to the drive-thru window and look in, all dark. Long story short, all signs point towards them closing up early and leaving. Now I'm tired because I worked a long shift. It's late, I'm still even in my uniform, I still smell like effing french fries, I'm not thinking so clearly. So my addled brain says, hey Thurin, maybe he's walking home. You told him you'd give him a ride, you should go look for him. So I go driving up the main drag, slowly, looking for my buddy. The McD's was on the south end of this street, so I headed north, keeping an eye out for anyone walking. Now, this main street after 1 a.m. changes to all flashing yellow lights, except for one cross street. The second to last one is flashing red in all directions. I knew this, of course, but I was distracted in looking for my buddy and rolled slowly right on through it. Well, right about then, my addled brain says, this is dumb, just go home. So I speed up to the speed limit and continue north towards home. I hadn't gone too far when I noticed the cop tailing me, but was surprised when he lit me up. Well, whatever, I pulled over and waited. Well, he comes up and taps on the glass. I start to roll the window down, but this terrible old car's window motor had a bad spot in the gears. At intervals, it would grind a little and I had to help it continue downwards. I'm pressing down on the glass as it drops. It would catch 4 times. And at almost the bottom, it gets really stuck and I'm beating on the glass with both hands to get it to go all the way down. Finally, it catches and drops into the door. Then I look up at the cop and say, yes? He's barely holding it together, but manages to ask the usual questions. Do you know why I pulled you over? And all that. So he tells me what I did and I tell him the shortened version of the story about what I'm doing and why I missed it and how I totally know about that light and just screwed up. He must have believed me because I just got a warning, but I like to think that my scrawny teenage butt with that POS car and dark circles under my eyes wasn't dangerous and didn't lie to him and made him laugh enough that he didn't have the heart to write me up. Also, it must have looked hilarious, me just rolling slowly right on through that red. Though in retrospect, I'm sure he was worried that he was pulling over a drunk. Nope, just tired and dumb, bro. I never missed that stop again, though. So OP didn't get even as much as a courtesy call from the coworker that he was supposed to drive home saying, hey, I went home with somebody else, or hey, I'm gonna walk home, I don't need you. OP says this was in the time before cell phones, but they could have just as easily called them at home before they left the store. If this coworker wanted to drive any other time, I'd be the guy sitting at home on my couch going, yeah, I'll be there in 5 minutes, and then I just wouldn't answer my phone again. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.